Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. I'm Imanie.
Hi, my name is Kiana, and you're watching Teens Meet World.
Yeah.
Today's video will be about Martin Luther King Jr. and his legacy. We will also be discussing the novel Dear Martin with the author, which is about a Black man named Justice McAllister, who is a top student in his class and a great debate partner. However, throughout his senior year, he witnesses injustice and experiences racism within his environment. In order to cope with the world around him, he starts a side project where he keeps a journal to write letters to Martin Luther King Jr., in which he asks for advice and such. It is a great read, and I truly suggest it.
Our guest for today's video is a New York Times bestseller, author, writer, and an amazing role model.
Please give it up for our very special guest, NIC STONE.
Oh my gosh! Look, you lied to these people. Talk about a great role model. Mm-mm.
Yes, you are.
Oh my God.
Yeah. How are you, loves, today?
We are good. How are you?
You know, life is interesting and funny, and I'm excited to talk to you all, though, because I have been looking forward to this. There's something super, super enjoyable to me about actually getting to talk to the people I write for. So
we're super excited and kind of nervous.
We actually have one quick live comment from a friend of mine who actually also loves you very much. Her name is Kai, and you have a few claps.
Hey, Kai. It's nice to kind of sort of meet you. Not exactly, but like I see you.
Yeah. Okay, so you go.
Can you just give us a little introduction about who you are, what you do, and anything else you'd like to tell the beautiful people?
Yeah, sure. So I am, as you mentioned, NIC STONE. NIC is short for Nicole. I write books for a living. I wrote, as you mentioned, Dear Martin. I have written some other ones that I'm like looking at right now. Let's see. This one, Odd One Out. This one, Jackpot. This one we talked about. And then this one actually is the sequel. I didn't drop the book. It's the sequel to Dear Martin. So yeah, like my goal with everything that I do is to bring more attention and visibility to people that you don't typically see stories about. The people that I didn't get to see stories about when I was a kid. And all those people happen to look like me. So yes, that's me.
So what inspired you to write Dear Martin?
Current events. So y'all were like mad young. What are you, 15? You 15?
I'm 16.
You're 16. You're both 16. Okay, so you would have been 8 in 3rd grade. There was an incident in Jacksonville, Florida, where a young man named Jordan Davis was killed at a gas station over loud music. And at that point, I had just had my first kid. My older son is 8 now, and he was 5 months old when this happened. And it just like really shook me up to think that a Black boy could lose his life because this white man in the car next to him didn't like his music. And I think that was the catalyst for the story. And then, there was like death after death after death. You guys saw in the spring of last year, George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Elijah McClain, like these lists of names. This has unfortunately been happening for a very long time. And when I was thinking about it back in 2013, 2014, 2015, a little bit, I was just frustrated, and I wanted to explore why people react the way that they do, not only to Black boys just out in the street, but even to like Black success. Like there's also kind of this pushback when Black people are successful at things. And I wanted to dig into that a little bit. So I wrote Dear Martin to address some of that stuff, and I was writing it for my sons. And then everybody's reading it, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, this works too. All right.
I'm so happy that you wrote that book because, like, with all that's going on right now, I think it's just so relatable to look back to because this year has been crazy and it has really frustrated me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
Do I get to ask you guys questions too? Or like,
Yeah,
is this like you
sure.
only asking me? Yeah, no, I want to know, like, from your perspective, just thinking about the stuff that was going on last year and seeing these protests, and like, y'all are at the age now where like you see the stuff, you can't not see it, right?
Mhm.
How does it impact you as young ladies who are out here trying to like change the world? Like, how did this stuff make you feel, and what did you feel like you needed to do about it?
for me, just being black and then seeing like my race just being destroyed this year, well last year, it was, I think this was the first time I started paying attention to the news. I started watching the news more. I started learning more and seeing what's going on. It made me want to start this podcast because I wanted to just speak about it and make an awareness about it, because it's just a sad thing to see going on right now, and it's hurtful, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Kiana?
So for me, it was not, I don't know how to word it. It was not necessarily an eye awakening thing because I have seen it. So just being able to see it largely spoken about it wasn't shocking to me. It's like this should have been done a long time ago, where people should have been standing up for it and should have been talking about it. And there was a current time from when the pandemic started, I was experiencing like a lot of writer's block because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge poet. So having seen like George Floyd and everything that happened, it just caused me to write so much about it, and it inspired me as a writer and just as a person in general to like listen, like there is stuff going on, and you're not going to be like, I physically, Kiana, like you are not going to be the person to ignore it. Like I am not black, I'm Puerto Rican and Colombian, and still, even so, in Colombian history, it started with a lot of black people, Afro-Colombiano. So it's like just the fact of how it's transitioned and you're able to physically see it and see that people are standing up for it. It makes you proud to be a part of that community.
Yeah, I like y'all. See, it's like I have such a high level of respect and admiration for young people. Like every great movement in history was started by young people. So y'all keep up the good work. You can ask your next question now, because I'm trying not to take over the interview.
Thank you. So our next question is actually a very personal one. So what's the most important thing you think Martin Luther King Jr. left behind?
Ooh, child. That's a question. The most important thing I think Martin Luther King Jr. left behind.
That is a hard one.
That is a hard one. I mean, because he left a lot of important things behind.
Yeah.
I do think that he left behind a legacy of courage. Because when I think about nonviolent protests, and especially when you juxtapose it to the stuff that was going on at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago, like you take nonviolent protests and you compare it to to rioting, basically, it takes more courage to protest nonviolently and to decide that you're not going to hit back if somebody hits you, that you're not going to resist if somebody is trying to harm you. Like that takes more courage to me than deciding you're going to break a window and go into the Capitol, right? So I think that his legacy of courage and of sticking to his lack of guns, honestly, is probably the most important thing he left behind. What I will say about Dr. King and why I admire him so much, he was steadfast in his beliefs and in the pursuit of seeing those beliefs become a reality. And I think we could all take a lesson from that, you know? Like I think we could all take a lesson from like this man whose legacy was all about, I'm just gonna go for it. Yeah. Oh, look, he's on the painting behind my head.
Oh, I love it.
It's him and Malcolm X.
You guys hear that?
A little bit.
Oh, okay.
No big deal.
Okay. I was just saying, yeah, he's so inspiring. I love him.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite things is going into high schools and like pointing out that like at one point Dr. King was the most hated man in America, because now we get to MLK Day and it's like, oh, we got a holiday. He was so amazing. look at all these quotes. Like, he was talking about how good it is to love people. And this man was #1 on the FBI's most watched list. Like, his house was firebombed. Like, people hated him when he was active. And it's something that I think we could stand to consistently think about and remember, especially when we're seeing the way people respond to Black Lives Matter activists, right? Like, the way people respond to BLM activists is a fraction of how they were responding to Dr. King when he was active. And so with that, you know, there is that steadfastness. If he could deal with what he was dealing with, so can we, you know?
Yeah. I still haven't heard the whole thing.
You said you don't understand the whole thing?
No, I love how he started the whole thing. Like, he's such a...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, agreed.
So what events inspired you to include them within the book?
Yeah. So I mentioned Jordan Davis. That inspires kind of the pivotal scene in the book. Of course, with the things that did inspire me, I did change some details just out of like respect for the families of the people who are gone. But Trayvon Martin is something that's touched on in there. Mike Brown, right? Yeah, Michael Brown. I'm like having a brain fart, a really intense one.
Okay, don't worry.
Yes, but I'm pretty sure it's Michael Brown. I have to look this up, y'all. I'm sorry. I can't like not.
Okay.
Yes, Michael Brown. Okay, I'm not completely losing my mind. So yeah, Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. And like the details surrounding his death are a mystery still. So yeah, it was really those three that really inspired the book. So yeah, Mike Brown, Jordan Davis, and Trayvon Martin. And like, there's other stuff in the book, like there's other stuff mentioned in the book. So when Justice goes to visit Quan, right? So Quan is the cousin of Justice's best friend, and Quan is in jail because he confesses to killing the cop who basically starts Justice's journey. So Justice gets profiled, he gets racially profiled in the first chapter of the book. And then in the second chapter, we find out that the cop who did the profiling has been killed. And the person who confessed to killing him is this guy that Justice grew up with and that Justice's best friend is actually cousins with. And Justice visits him in detention, in his detention center in the second half of the book. And he mentions a dude he calls White Boy Sean, right? And it's about, and he basically says that like there's this dude, he was here for like 10 minutes and basically he had gotten up in the middle of the night and stabbed his dad 8 times. And he got off with like community service. I pulled that. That was a real story. Like you could look up
Story?
Boy Stabs Dad. Yeah, absolutely. Like I really wanted to do anytime. And the same thing, it's the same thing in Dear Justice. Like anytime you see the story of somebody that Quan is talking about in detention, because Dear Justice is actually Quan writing letters to Justice, right, from his detention center. So he mentions these different kids that he meets in detention. Every single one of those stories is based on something true, because I spent months and months and months visiting detention centers and talking to the kids there and listening to their stories, you know? So like there's a story of a kid who, you know, his dad left and so his family fell apart and he got into drugs and he got into a gang. And then he killed somebody and now he's in jail. And like, I got there, I stepped into the cell block and they were like, yo, you should meet Taco. Like they called him Taco, which is actually really racist, by the way. But that's what they called this kid because he was Latinx and they called him Taco. And his name was Roberto. And so like we sit down and within like 30 seconds of sitting down, he has spilled out this entire story to me. And it was just watching these kids and seeing how desperately they just wanted somebody to listen to them. Like that, those are the things that inspire me in the books.
That's so great that you did that.
Yeah.
You sat and listen to their stories. That is so amazing.
I got on them about calling him Taco too, by the way.
Good.
Because like, no, we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm. I think that the fact that you took time out of your own day to go listen to stories who aren't necessarily wanted to be heard definitely is needed, especially in this time of just not listening. I think that you being a listener definitely helps.
Yeah. See, you are a role model.
Yes. See,
Yeah.
you are.
Thanks, ladies. I appreciate it.
So our next question is, I'm going to read an excerpt of Dear Martin, and I'm just going to ask a question afterwards. So
Okay.
here it is. It is a letter from Justice to Martin on September 8th. Yeah, we had this discussion in class today, and I don't know, Ma. Everything I'm doing right now feels like a losing battle. She nodded. Hard being a black man, ain't it? I shrugged. Guess that's one way to put it. All I know is I can't seem to find where I fit, especially at that school. It's just like I've been there my whole high school career, and I still feel like an outsider, you know? We were talking about the Declaration of Independence, and all I could think was how Shamar Carson was straight up denied his inalienable rights. It really bugged me out. It should have. I did the math when I got back to my room. There are 192 years between the Declaration of Independence and the end of all that Jim Crow stuff. Now we're over a decade into the 21st century, and I know from experience, people like me are still getting shafted. So that's the excerpt from the letter from September 18th. And one of the questions is, if someone were having this conversation with you, what advice would you give them?
So what I will say about Dear Martin, I like you reading that, I was like, ooh, like I'm super engaged. Like I didn't write it, right? So I hear these things that are in this book. The most important thing I think in Dear Martin is on page 152. And this is what I tell anytime I get the opportunity to interact with young people. I will read these two sentences. It's the first two sentences on the page. You can't change how other people think and act, but you're in full control of you. When it comes down to it, the only question that matters is this: if nothing in the world ever changes, what type of person are you going to be? Those two lines, I think, are kind of the crux of this story, because really what Justice is coming to discover is that he has to decide how he's going to move through the world. He has to decide what he's going to believe about himself. I think that a lot of the time we give other people a little bit too much power over how we feel about ourselves. Like
100%.
nobody's going to tell me I'm not the dopest, right? Like, and if somebody does, why would I believe them? I think that there's this thing where like you get to decide what you believe about you. If somebody says something bad about you, is it true? If it's not true, okay, let it rock. You know what I mean? Like we have so much more power over our own view of ourselves. And with that view, we take that self that we know and we do our best to do good in the world with it. But that's really what I would say, right? Like you're coming to this realization that like things are stacked against, like the deck is stacked against you. You're going to have to work harder than people who might be differently complected. And it makes you angry. I don't think it's possible to be a person who is conscious of anything in this country, a person of color. Like it's impossible to be conscious of anything in this country and not be mad like all the time. However, I'm not going to let these structures actually stop me. And I don't think that either of you or anybody watching should let racist structures stop them either. Like the only person who can stop you is you. So don't stop yourself, even though it's not fair. Like keep going.
I just want to say I love your energy. It's so inspiring.
Seriously,
I'm glad you said energy. A lot of times I get, you're so arrogant. And I'm like, no, I just believe in myself. And I think that that's a really important thing
I
too.
like it. I like it.
No, like the energy that, yeah, exactly. The energy that you have and just the way that you just bring about the conversation, that's definitely needed in this time. And I think that was, like, it couldn't have been said any better. That's how the conversation should have gone. And that's how,
Y'all making an old lady blush.
So what do you think Martin Luther King would have said or done about what occurred in 2020?
I knew y'all was gonna ask this one. I really think that he would have said and done everything that he already said and did. because it's no different. Like the only difference is like now it's illegal to discriminate against people. And by illegal, all I mean by that is like you can get sued. Like you're not going to get arrested. If you own a restaurant and you don't let somebody come in who's of a different race, you can't get arrested for that, but like you can get sued.
Yeah.
But I think that what he said then still stands, you know, like there is still, we can't stop fighting. We can't stop pushing. We haven't achieved his dream. We've gotten closer than we were when he was alive and when he made the speech, but like he would tell us to keep going. I think he would tell us to keep going. He would be on these front lines of these marches, arm in arm with people, not shouting, not saying anything, but just leading by example. And one of the things that does bother me is when people, honestly, another part of Dear Martin, the reason that Justice writes letters to Martin Luther King instead of somebody else is because I got so tired in 2014 of hearing 2013 and 2014 of hearing people use Dr. King's words in opposition to nonviolent protesters. So when Mike Brown was killed, like protests swept the nation, not as intensely as last year, but like they swept the nation. And in Ferguson, Missouri, where he was killed, it was like nonstop protesting. And the way I kept hearing these political figures and these like talking heads on TV, basically saying that Dr. King wouldn't have supported what the nonviolent protesters were doing, I was like, who Dr. King are you talking about? It's not my Dr. King. Certainly not the one that I grew up learning about. There was one time, there was a march. I'm in Atlanta. And there was a march planned here in Atlanta. And our mayor, who at the time was he got on TV and he said, all I ask is that you don't take the freeways. Dr. King would never take a freeway. What? Like, who? It's like the further we get away from what Dr. King actually did, the more people shave off the things that make them uncomfortable. So I think that he would be like, y'all got it. Stay the course. Like, keep it up. Do what you're doing.
Yeah. 100%.
Exactly. That makes no sense. Like, he would have done it anywhere and everywhere.
Absolutely.
Like, it doesn't matter if it was a freeway. We actually have a live comment from one of our past guests. He said, it makes me feel good about going to work tomorrow.
Fabulous.
Yeah. It's crazy to see how some of these things are still happening. Like they were happening when he was alive. They're happening now. And we're in 2021. It's just crazy. Like, I don't even understand why it's still a thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of like up and down when it comes to racial progress in this country. Like there will be these times of really intensive forward motion. You have people of color, and specifically Black people, pounding the pavement, doing everything to feel like they're accepted, or not even necessarily feel like they're accepted, but to like we gonna let y'all know we here, and this is what we look like. This is how we move. We're not going to be shamed for existing in the bodies that we exist in. And then you'll see this period where it's like, oh, things have changed. And there's this lull, right? And there's this idea that like we get into this post-racial, but obviously not. You know, like we have to, legislation changes in stages. So some legislation was changed in 1968. Some more stuff was changed in the 1980s. And now we still got stuff changing now. And I think that will continue because it's not until we realize that a law is either racist or homophobic or sexist or, you know, transphobic, any kind of like discriminatory word that you can come up with. You don't realize that it's that until somebody points it out. So I think that as people continue to point out, like, wait a minute, why are there no accessibility ramps leading up to your store? What about disabled people who want to shop here? You know, like you have, and it's easy things to fix, right? So yeah, I do think that a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with now, we're going to hit like a little bit of like a lull for a second, and then it's going to like ramp back up when the next round of things that we need to be anti-racist about comes to the fore.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So our next question is, this is my little fangirl question is, would you think about Dear Martin becoming a movie?
Please.
I love that. I mean, look, this is one of those things that's out of my control. Hollywood is a real interesting place. And people pick people who are in that industry decide what they want to make and not make. And like, I would love it. Like, I'd be super down. Like, I actually can see it more as a television show, like a mini series, a limited series than a movie. Look, come through Netflix and like,
Definitely.
whatever
Ooh,
happens
Netflix.
with it.
What else?
Hulu,
YouTube.
Netflix, HBO Max, like there's all of the streaming
HBO
services.
Max,
Everybody
no.
got a streamer now. Everybody. I'm like, where I need to make NIC STONE TV and just have my own streaming service.
We're gonna get that out there.
Look.
Listen, I will be your first subscriber.
Yes.
Oh, I love
I will
it.
be your first.
If you get that,
So-
you have to do that. You have to do that.
Yes, definitely.
Look, I don't have time. I'm gonna pretend like I do.
So our next little segment is we decided that we were going to do a little Dear Martin activity of our own. So everyone's going to go around and say Dear Martin and then just continue like a quick two-liner of what you'd like to say to him if he's standing right in front of you.
Okay, I'm gonna go first. So, dear Martin, thank you for everything you've done. You crawled so that the nation could walk, and you've paved the future.
Okay, with the wordplay, I see you, Miss Imanie.
I like writing.
What's your metaphor using self? I love it.
Yeah.
So I'll go second. So I wrote, Dear Martin, thank you for paving the way and fighting for what you believed in, even if it gave you consequences. You showed us that we should always right wrongs, even if they aren't in our own harm's way.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, it's your turn.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay, look, I'm gonna like drop a bar. Dear
Okay.
Martin, you're lit. We won't forget.
Okay.
I retire as a poet.
Oh
I
no,
retire.
your poetry is far better than anything I could come up with. Trust me on that one. NIC STONE cannot write poetry to save her life. Like it's no good at all.
Yeah. It's not my thing either. I'm not gonna lie.
I admire those of you who are good at it though, because like
Thank
Kiana.
the
you.
ability to put so much power into so few words. Like teach me your ways, Kiana.
Thank you. Like Amanda yesterday for the inauguration.
Bomb. She was bomb. She was so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw
You got next, Kiana.
That would be such a dream come true. Like I would cry. That would be insane. Like I've been writing for so long, and if I got the chance to do that, I think that day would be like bookmarked in the story of my life as the best day.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I can't.
Yeah.
Well, keep up the good work. You'll probably get there. Just saying.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so that was the end of our podcast, and we came up with a little thank you gesture.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna start. As an ode to your amazing book, we would like to answer the statement, Dear Nick. Dear Nick, it was a pleasure to have you. We are so inspired by what you've done, and we hope to be able to work with you in the future.
Dear Nick, it was an honor to have you on our podcast. We hope to be able to pick more books out from Barnes & Noble for you. Thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to see you soon.
Yes. Be sure to follow us at teens.meet.world on Instagram, and be sure to subscribe.
And go be sure to purchase NIC STONE's sequel to Dear Martin titled Dear Justice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Bye.